Hi, I'm Mike Morse, along with Kevin Dietz. Welcome to Open Mic. Our next guest is Matt Pepper, the CEO of the Michigan Humane Society. I'm really excited to have him here for a conversation, all things animals, puppies, kittens, and every other type of animal you can think of. Matt's a great guy, and you're going to learn about the Michigan Humane Society and all the great work that they're doing and all the needs that they have and ways that you can help. So stay tuned for this next episode.
Joining us this morning is Mike Morse, Detroit's top attorney. Mike Morse is in here to tell us about the backpack giveaway.
Adapt and change things up a little bit every year.
Welcome to the podcast, Matt Pepper.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to talk to you, all things animals today. But for the people who don't know who you are you and what do you do for the Michigan Humane Society?
So I'm Matt Pepper. I'm the president and CEO for the Michigan Humane Society, and I'm honored to be a part of an organization that has been a Detroit icon for 142 years, representing both the animals in this community and the people who love them.
What do you have to do growing up to become the president and CEO of such an iconic institution here in Michigan?
You have to have really understanding parents first.
Okay.
I've always worked in animal welfare. It's all I've ever done. So my background's in wildlife biology. Moved into animal welfare doing cruelty investigations. Worked for an animal control department in Grand Rapids before moving to be a director of animal services in Caddo Parish, Shreveport, Louisiana, Memphis, Tennessee, over to Albuquerque, New Mexico before this opportunity opened up. And this is if animal welfare is your passion, this is the city and this is the organization you want to be a part of.
How many years have you been the president and CEO?
5 last month, and it feels like it's been forever. It feels like part of a family, and it's a great experience.
Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you very much.
From all accounts, from everything I've witnessed and I think the public in general think you're doing a great job. I think that the Michigan Humane Society is in very good hands with you. Let's talk about the new building. How many years has that been up and running?
3 years this March, so it's done some incredible things for that community.
And this is in Detroit. And what's the address, or where are you exactly located?
It's right off of 75, off of Clay and Grand Avenue. You can't miss it. If you know the Russell Industrial Center, it's right across the street. It really is an icon in that North End community. And to your point, if you haven't seen it, you're missing out on something that is critical to this community.
So I've been there several times. Was that in the works when you took the job?
It was. It was.
So you oversaw the building process of it, or you were there for the building process of it?
I did, and it was a much needed improvement for the organization and more importantly for the animals. I mean, the previous building we were doing incredible work out of, but was built in 1890. And we moved in 1931. It was converted in the 50s. It was time for a new facility based on all the work we were doing.
Right. So I've toured your building a few times now, probably more than a few times. And I was surprised all the services that you offered there. So for people who are listening and watching, why don't you take us through what services you offer to the citizens of Detroit and the surrounding area?
Yeah, so we're a very complex organization. So we really consider ourselves a human-centered organization. And while we speak for the animals, we do just as much for the families in this community. And oftentimes people think of us as a great place to adopt an animal. And as you well know, we're a fantastic place to adopt an animal. I would argue the best. But there's a lot more to us than that. There is cruelty investigations work, rescue work. We lobby in Lansing legislatively, making sure that our laws and our ordinances represent our values. We do a lot with education. We train police officers on animal behavior in the field, on the connection between human violence and animal cruelty. I personally teach that class. We really intertwine ourselves with all aspects of the quality of life of everyone. So if you want to talk public safety, we're a critical part of that. Public health. Think about animal welfare alone. Petting a dog can lower your blood pressure by 10%. And all of us who own pets know the value of them to our emotional and physical well-being. And then I look at even things like our economy. The economy is a big issue in Detroit. Pet owners will spend $72 billion on their pets. And we recently had the DTE Energy Corporation do a study about the economic impact of the Michigan Humane Society in this community, and it was more than $80 million that our activities contribute to this local economy just through what people do with their pets.
Wow. So I have lots of things I want to talk about. Adoption. I want to talk about vet services that we didn't talk about. But let's talk about the cruelty investigation that I've been part of, lucky enough to be part of. And I think last year, or maybe earlier this year, I went on a cruelty investigation ride along. I don't know the official term for it, where you put a flak jacket on me and a jacket.
It's a ride along.
A ride along. I did a
right.
ride along, and with some fabulous officers. You have a wonderful staff. They were so knowledgeable. But I want to tell you my experience. Then I want to know. I want to hear what they're actually doing out in the field. But what I witnessed that day was, I thought I was going to be going on this ride along, looking for people who are neglecting animals and taking those animals and saving those animals. And that was my impression. What actually happened was we didn't take any animals. We helped the families take care of those animals better. And it was really eye-opening and moving for me to watch. And the advice and the compassion, because these guys were, capable of taking animals, strong enough. They had the equipment, they had the vans, but even dogs that we would see outside that were underfed or sleeping outside, which is allowed in the city of Detroit, as long as they have a little tiny shelter and some straw. There was little houses that didn't have straw or didn't have a proper bed or didn't have food or water out. And we brought them straw. We brought them, there are free houses that you give out, free dog houses that you give out, free food and counseling. And we sat and talked to people who had 2, 3, 4 dogs, who couldn't afford 2, 3, 4 dogs. And I thought, well, why don't we take these dogs and give them to somebody else? And one of the officers said to me, that's a good idea, Michael, but when we've done that, they just go out and get new dogs. And we're back in the same vicious cycle. And I learned that for the first time. I didn't think of that. And they love their dogs. They love their animals. And you can't really, you can take them away, but it's a sad thing and it's not good for either one of them. And so if you can educate them and give them food and good shelter and the right straw to make sure these dogs are safe and secure and healthy, that's a win-win. Is it? Did I read it right?
No, you absolutely read it right. And you said 2 things. One I want to comment on first. You talked about my team. The Michigan Humane Society is a large organization. We've got about 250 employees who really embody the mission. And my dad, who was a CEO of a company for a long time and was always an executive, gave me some great advice, which is a good leader surrounds himself with people who are better than they are. And I've done that. I am moved to almost to tears every day, seeing the level of compassion that this team does at every level, at every point in the organization, regardless of whether anyone sees what they're doing. They do it because it's the right thing. And it truly is inspiring. But the work that they do in the field is that type of generational systemic change that will change this community. So a lot of what we do is enforcing the laws. We handle dogfighting cases, some pretty serious acts of cruelty, neglect. And if you knew better and you still did it, you should go to jail. And we do that frequently. But primarily our job is education. There's a recent study that showed that 84% of people who struggle with poverty have never interacted with either a veterinarian or a local animal welfare organization. And frankly, their view of law enforcement is one of punitive and one they're afraid of. So how do we change that experience? And that's what we're doing. We're changing lives by giving people the information, resources, and access to services to change the way in which they view their animals. This is kind of a heavy topic, but we recently saw 2 little children lose their lives to dogs in the city of Detroit. And if you want to change that from happening in the future, then you need to change the experiences that people have with their animals. We live in a community that unfortunately people feel like they had to have a dog for security. And there's a lot of struggles that people deal with on a day-to-day basis that I don't claim to understand. But if you want to change that experience and create a safer community for people and pets, you have to create relationships with people. And that's what our team does every day. Not only our field services team, we have a program called our Pets for Life program, our community solutions, that now is going door to door in the area surrounding our Detroit shelter and creating true relationships and interconnecting people with other social services. If you struggle feeding your pet, it's probably likely you struggle feeding yourself. If you're having a hard time finding medical care for your pet, you probably need some help yourself. And what we want to do is look at the pet as a member of the family, but treat the family holistically and give people access to services and support the family.
So can you share with us how a family may have come from one side of this to the other? As you come to them, you find them, they need education, they need help, and the growth and the difference to life is now for the family and the animal after you guys have been able to educate them properly.
Yeah, so we actually deal with it on a pretty regular basis. So we have a gentleman who we ran into in the North End community who had 7 dogs. 7 dogs and could barely afford to both feed himself and house himself. But he loved these dogs. These dogs were important to him, and he loved them. One of them was attacked. He had no means to, get to the veterinary clinic, and no means to care for it if he did. So our cruelty investigations unit was called out because there was a dog that was injured and was not getting vet care. So we went out there, and the team that I have is some of the most inspiring, compassionate people you will ever meet. So they didn't start with, why aren't you taking care of your dog? They start with, tell me what got you in this situation. And this man proceeded to tell an entire story about how important these animals are to him and how he collected them because they were starving on the streets. And he'd sacrifice meals for these pets. He'd given up his own food for these animals. Yet a lot of people would look at him and say, you shouldn't have those dogs. But that's not true. He doesn't have 7 dogs. He saved 7 lives. But every day after that, once a month, for almost a year, he put his dog on a wagon and walked it a mile to our veterinary clinic for its recheck. But thanks to some incredible donors and the support we have from the community, we were able to care for him. And now that man is one of our most vocal supporters in that community, telling people, you should get to know these guys. They're not that bad. They're in this community. We don't want to just be in a community. We want to be a part of a community.
That's a great story. So I know that when I was there, we saw some needs of the animal cruelty investigators. I think one of our first projects we did together was getting them some technology in the car, because we were in these vans, Kevin, and we would go out with these call sheets, but we didn't have computers in the car or tablets in the car to be able to communicate with headquarters, to communicate, and if there was an emergency, so they had to keep going back, and they were wasting a ton of time. So why don't you tell Kevin what we were able to do? Yeah,
so absolutely. So before, we were an entirely paper-based program. I mean, we had some technology, but not enough to really create efficiencies in the program. And the technology that you were able to provide saved lives. I mean, it allows us to expedite processes. So we have to get warrants on occasion. Well, instead of having to leave, go write it, go hand out, we can stay on scene, make sure things stay stable, process that, have that, and remove those animals from that situation when we need to. It's also critical for real-time information. Information changes in a hurry, especially with our rescue department. Dog could be at one exit on the highway 1 minute. By the time we get there, it could be on another. Without real-time information, we're not able to do our job. And this has created some significant efficiencies, both in holding people accountable to animal cruelty and in our ability to respond to animals in need.
That's amazing. And I take zero credit for this, except I did, have the idea that, we were out there and we were chasing a dog on the highway, and there was no way to communicate. There was no GPS. There was no way to know where the other vans were, and we kept having to go back. And I said, you need technology in these cars. They said, we're working on it, and that's how we all made it happen together as a team, which makes me feel really good that the members of my staff chipped together, and we were able to outfit some of these vans. It's a great feeling.
You did something good and something that was impactful. And I will tell you, after seeing the video of him helping our staff chase the dog, if this whole lawyer thing doesn't work out, I've got a job for you.
That was scary. I'll tell you. Have you ever been on the side of the road and see dogs getting...
Yeah. As a reporter, we when the grass would be too tall, you had packs of dogs moving, and we would call in. We have a close relationship with the media and the Humane Society. We'd call in and we'd say, hey, there's a pack in this neighborhood or over here, and they'd come and try and find them, see where they were going, what they were doing. But that's the thing that's so striking is, you may think Michigan Humane Society and you may think, oh yeah, I see them on TV, adopt a pet or whatever. But if you actually can educate people or show people all the different things that you do, lots of people can have ideas, and lots of people may have solutions to help you solve those problems and do so much more for the animals that you're trying to help. It really is one of those things where just educating people and having them tell other people what they've learned about it and that word spreading where it can really make a huge difference.
What are the other things that cruelty investigation is in need of these days? What are some of the needs to educate the families and help save animals?
Well, I think a lot of it involves the supplies that we then in turn provide to people in the community. So let's be honest. If you've looked outside your window, the weather's getting cooler. The wind today is pretty horrific. There are animals outside in this weather. And again, if our job is to create a better environment for the animals, if we need to remove an animal, we will. But our first job is to create a better environment. That's supplies for a lot of people who can't afford them. So a lot of times it's outreach supplies, it's dog houses, it's straw, it's hay, and frankly, that's a program that could expand to meet the need. There's still more neglect and suffering than I think we're able to respond to at any given time. So it's a program that we've expanded upon.
What's your estimate as to how many homeless dogs and cats there are out there in Detroit?
Oh, yeah, I think it's hard to tell you how many there are, but I can tell you that at any given day, we can bring in 10 to 20 more. We can have a large-scale cruelty case, and we can bring in 30 to 40. There is no shortage of opportunities to make a difference in this community.
And talk about, I was surprised the large-scale veterinary services that you offer at this location off 75. I mean, you have, how many vets do you have there full time?
So we have 28 veterinarians now, including some contract veterinarians.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin, you didn't know that.
No.
I mean, you don't even think of taking your animals down there, and you're not just, this is not free charity work. I mean, it's discounted a bit. You want people to come and get their animals taken care of there. It's some way that it's a way that you help, keep the lights on.
Yeah. Well, your last comment about what are some of the needs in the field? The needs for the Michigan Humane Society don't stop in the field. Once the animal gets there, that's when the real costs escalate. So our job has become complicated in terms of how many animals are receiving medical care in our facility. Typically, it's more than 80% of the animals in our care at all 4 of our shelters are under some sort of medical or behavioral rehabilitation, and some of that can be significant. So a lot of our veterinarians, we operate 4 veterinary clinics at our Rochester Hills, Westland, Howell, and Detroit shelter. But we also have shelter veterinarians who work strictly on the animals in our care in the community. And it's a complex operation and an expensive one. Our costs are going up as the animals that are coming to us are in more desperate need.
And they're picking up strays on the street who need help. There's nobody to pay the bill. I mean, they're paying the bill 100%. And then your goal is to get these animals adopted. And I say dogs. I like to say dogs because I'm a dog person, but you're finding more than just dogs, right?
Oh, we have lots of. We're about 50-50 dogs and cats, but I will tell you, agricultural animals are a big part of what we do. So we recently had an 82 bird investigation where we had to impound 82 birds, including peacocks, turkeys, chickens. I had 4 cows living in my Detroit garage for 2 months.
Wait, that's a new segment. Adopt a cow.
I'm the wrong guy to say that because I will bring you a cow.
I will bring you a cow. That's right.
I will bring you a cow. But so, can I tell you a quick story about something that really means a lot to me about the animals in the care, how much individual care they get? There was a little Chihuahua that was brought to our shelter, and it was named Lola because my daughter saw it online and named it Lola. The call came into our rescue department that I don't even know what this is. I think there's a dog in my backyard. It was about a 3.5 pound, just bones, no fur left. Lola had no bottom jaw, no teeth left. And my staff gave it such care that it would bring tears to your eyes to see how they cared for that animal. And what's most powerful is that they cared for it until they finally found it a special needs home. It had to be fed wet food. And it died 30 days later. But it died in a home. It died in a home with a family and not cold in somebody's backyard. And that's what the support to our organization makes happen.
I remember that was there a story about that on the news, or
it didn't make the news, and that's what I love about it. It was powerful, and it was just done because it was the right thing to do. And there are hundreds of stories just like that every day at our shelters.
So how hard is it to actually adopt a cat or a dog? Is it as simple as seeing it on TV and calling the number and you go get your dog, or you must have some process that people go through?
Are you asking for a friend, or is this
I might. I know some people.
Hey, if you know some
my
people,
dog's pretty old.
So the process is pretty simple. What we want to do is just have a conversation with you. It's not an interview. It's not an evaluation of your willingness or ability to be a pet owner. It's really about, we want to find the right pet for you in the right situation for you so that you find something that lives the rest of your life. Anyone who's ever had a pet knows the value they have to us, and we want to give that experience to you just like we give it to tens of thousands of people every year.
Yeah, because I always think, like, I'll watch it on TV and I'll see this one dog. I'll say, oh, that dog's so cute. I have to have that dog. But I realize that that dog may go to someone else. So how do you get the people to come in and fall in love with all the dogs that are there?
Yeah. So we use technology a little bit for that too. So there's a recent study that found that 80 something % of people first look at an animal online before they go on and check it out at shelters. And we use technology at multiple sites. We use our own website. People just come in. We do offsite adoption events. So we operate 4 shelters: Howell, Rochester Hills, Westland, and Detroit. We also have an adoption center in Sterling Heights at the Petco near Lakeside Mall. And then we have multiple satellite facilities too. So there's no shortage of opportunities.
And on that point, is it or is it not a no-kill shelter?
So that's a great term. We actually don't engage in using that term. We find it to be a little bit divisive, but it's a great question because nothing loses its life at our facility unless it's irremediably suffering or dangerous. We take our obligation to public safety seriously. Our medical staff does incredible things every day. This is a great example. But under any definition, we would be. But we just don't use that because we want to be more of a convener and a collaborator in the community and draw organizations together. And I think in order for us to do that and fill gaps in resources, we're successful if every other organization in Detroit is adopting their animals too. Every animal in this community is ours.
So if the animal is not dangerous and the animal is not and is savable, you do everything in your power to save it.
Oh, they're going to find a home.
Is this little Lola?
That's Lola right there.
So let me get a close up on Lola. Beautiful little animal. And I love that somebody took the dog knowing that it wasn't going to be around that long, and it's a beautiful story. How many animals do you guys have at home with all your kids? And
so I almost had Lola before I realized I was probably not the right home. I have a little 3-legged Chihuahua named Rocky, who is just fantastic.
That's my cameraman's name.
I know
Rocky.
it is. He is the absolute love of my life. He's never within 5 feet from me. And he's a great story, too. We amputated his front leg. He's got 2 pretty serious issues with his back knees. He was hit by a car in Detroit, hit by a truck in Detroit. And we amputated his leg, got him ready for adoption, not because I was interested, but again, because it was the right thing to do. And then I also have a little Cocker Spaniel who's getting up there in age. She's about 11, 12 years old, named Blondie, who I adopted when I was the director of Memphis Animal Services. I like to tell people I have 4 wild animals and 2 beautiful dogs.
Right. Exactly. We understand. We have children too. Let's get back to the Pitbull issue that you mentioned. And I have people in my life that we disagree on this issue sometimes because in the field that I'm in, I've handled hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dog bite cases. And most of the time, it's some kind of pit bull mix or a purebred pit bull. And most of the time, if not every single time, the dog owner will say this was the first time that the dog bit, which we can debate whether that's truthful or not truthful. But, I know on the one side, people blame the dog owners. On the other side, people blame the breed. There are certain communities in this country that won't allow pit bull or pit bull breeds in their community. I want to know your take on it.
Yeah, now we're getting to the real questions. I like this one. So the first thing that I'll tell you is the Michigan Humane Society is opposed to any type of breed-specific legislation. If you do the research, they're not very effective. Number one, it's really challenging to identify what a pit bull is, given that under many definitions, it's not even actually a breed. They also are misdiagnosed a lot by even professionals. And also, this is a bigger issue than pit bulls. This is an issue of, I would argue, poverty and access to resources. Think about a source of acquisition for people who struggle with poverty. So there was a recent study that I saw that said 75% of people in areas that struggle with poverty, which is not only where we see these issues, but it's where we see many of them, acquired their animals because a neighbor's dog hit a litter or because one walked up on them. And when you've got a prevalence of pit bulls in a community, those are the ones that are having puppies and those are the ones that are walking up to you. My philosophy is that it is the owner and the environment you've put those dogs in that create the dog's behavior. Now, there are absolutely behavioral challenges in dogs. So a pit bull, we adopt a Chihuahua and it bites someone. It comes back as an adoption return. I adopt a pit bull and it bites someone. It's front page of the news.
Right.
So there's a very, very real considerations to be taken in place. I also think we have to look at the difference between resident pets versus companions. You look at a pit bull that's a pet, it's a great dog. It's a fantastic family dog. You look at one that's tied out in the backyard, it's not a dog, it's a weapon used for security purposes. And I think that's the difference. And I think that can be any animal given that environment, that upbringing. If your whole life was a 6-foot circle tied around a stake, you would protect that and you didn't know how to interact around humans. That's the behavior you'd display if you were forced to interact with one.
So new federal law was just signed into effect. I wanted to ask you, is that a game changer or is that moving the needle? Does that have a real impact if it's a felony now?
So first of all, animal welfare is a Class A felony reportable crime by the FBI as it is now. Now it's that can be a little misleading because a lot of those are optional. You don't really have to report many of those, and many communities don't because they don't want to be seen as the one with all the animal cruelty. But it is a true indicator of human violence. So we work with domestic violence shelters. We work with local law enforcement on recognizing connection between animal cruelty and human violence. And I could talk about that all day. I teach that to police officers, and it's really exciting to me to see the recognition. So that law is a fantastic step. It's about a specific type of cruelty.
Can you describe what the law is?
So I believe you're talking about the law that talks about a specific type of film that you can produce, like a film that would result in destroying animals,
right,
and crushing animals and live animals. That becomes a felony, and how you use those films. It's not that all animal cruelty becomes a felony. Now, all states have some form of felony level provisions in their laws. And I think as we look at how do we enforce them, it's typically not animal cruelty happening in isolation with other crimes anyways.
So maybe it's a small step, and maybe it brings more attention to the issue where people can really sit down and say, all right, what is cruelty and what should be done about it?
It's a big step.
And like you said, they should go to jail. If you're training a dog to fight, you should go to jail.
It's a big step. It's a little bit misleading to title that animal cruelty is a felony. It's a specific type in this law. It's a great step. It's a first step, and now we need to continue to move these things forward.
In Detroit, you mentioned dogs outside in a 6-foot radius. What I learned when I was on my ride along with your team was that it's allowed in the city of Detroit. It's not allowed in every community, and I haven't done the research. I don't know what communities allow and don't. But in the city of Detroit, 365 days a year, you're allowed to have a dog loose in your backyard, living in the backyard, and the only shelter they need is a small little doghouse with clean, dry straw. And I believe, is there a food and water thing too, that they need a little food and water out there with them?
Can't be chained up though.
No, they can't be chained up for the. I think the new Detroit ordinance is 3 hours or something like that. More than that.
Do you agree with that ordinance allowing dogs to live outside 365, 24 days a year?
Well,
24 hours a day.
Yeah. So philosophically, absolutely not. I don't think that's any place for an animal. I think even if your animal's for security purposes, have it inside the home. That's a much better place for it. But I don't believe with it philosophically. I think it's a law that we try to work with to change behaviors and change philosophies around animals. And we do have to work with. In the state of Michigan, I'm not sure if it's illegal in any particular municipalities, but the state of Michigan allows your dog to be outside as long as you provide adequate shelter. And the water issue, people don't think about water freezing in the winter. They can't access it if it's frozen. So a lot of dogs become dehydrated in the winter. Food's a big issue. You eat more food because you got to generate more heat. There's a lot of complications that come with the Michigan winters that I don't agree they should be living outside philosophically at all. But I do recognize that it happens, and that's a long-term cultural change that we have to make.
You guys, you do work in trying to change laws.
We do.
Have you tried to change that one?
So those are laws that look at changing. So every year we set a legislative priority. We look at a lot of things that we would like to see changed. Tethering, resident dogs outside. Those are things that we do work towards changing. They're very complicated, ingrained type laws that are difficult to get changed immediately. But sometimes we try to get things into the legislature simply as a shot over the bow that this is coming. And it's a conversation that is going to have to be had in the near future.
The term I hear is garage cats or outdoor cats, and these cats that supposedly don't come into the home, and they'll say, "Oh, don't worry about cat allergies. Ours is a outdoor cat." What does that mean? And it just seems crazy to me in Michigan that such a thing can even exist.
You'd be surprised how well they do during the winter. So there are populations all throughout the city of trap, neuter, return programs is what they call them, or cat colonies that people manage. Truly, if they're out there thriving on their own, they're probably okay. Wild cats mirror wildlife more than they do domestic cats and domestic animals. And, there are some real considerations. People talk about, the impact on wildlife, the impact on property. But the truth is, there are populations that thrive in the city of Detroit. It's a program that we support. We have trap, neuter, return programs in all of our shelters and engage in that activity in all of our communities.
And you're not just, I keep referencing Detroit, but you're responsible for how much of the state?
Well, depending on what program, all of it. So we have shelters in Detroit again, Rochester Hills, Westland, and Howell. We have adoption center in Sterling Heights and Macomb County. We have another warehouse in Detroit where our Community Solutions program goes out of. And then we have a statewide program. So our local investigators aren't our only team of law enforcement officers. We have a 3-person team of statewide response officers who go anywhere throughout the state to help support local law enforcement where they might have deficiencies. Maybe it's expertise, maybe it's resources. So typically those are larger scale cases. So it's a dogfighting case we helped in Battle Creek. It's a cockfighting case we helped in Tawas City. It's also education roundtables. So we bring our law enforcement team and some of our veterinarians around the state. We've gone as far as Marquette, Traverse City, to do education, to bring best practices to organizations that may not normally have access to it. In addition, we host the Great Lakes Animal Welfare Conference, which is the largest conference in the Midwest. That's a great education opportunity for any animal welfare professional in the state to gain some critical information, and it extends beyond that. We've had attendees from California, Florida this year, so we get a lot of attendees. About 400 people attend.
Interesting. And how prevalent is dogfighting and cockfighting in our area here?
It certainly hasn't gone away. So I would say just about every day in our Detroit shelter, primarily, you'll see dogs that have been the subject of dogfighting. Now, the reality of that is a lot of people assume that it's strictly an inner city issue, and it's not. And that's a flawed logic, because there are a number of instances where we'll find dogs that have been used in fighting in Detroit, and they'll trace back to a home in Westland, in Oakland County. Maybe that's where the breeding stock are kept. So, we recently did a case where we impounded 35 dogs from a dogfighting case in 4 houses. And the gentleman who was arrested had been offered $50,000 for 2 of his dogs prior to us kicking in his door for breeding purposes.
And didn't he sue you guys for the money, or try to get the dogs back?
That was the birds.
Oh, you told me a story once.
Yeah, that was the birds.
Has social media exacerbated the problem? Do they talk about it, or do they shy away from sharing videos and things? And I'm talking about the dogfighting type thing, because it's always seemed pretty secretive. They obviously like to hold these events, but they don't want people finding out about them either.
Well, typically dogfighting is going to be word of mouth. I have heard studies as high as $1 billion industry in this country, animal fighting is. And we've had cases in the course of our history where hundreds of thousands of dollars have changed hands. So I don't think they're advertising typically on social media, although you'd be surprised what people put on the internet, not knowing that later on we're going to use that against them. So,
what did you teach me when I was when I did this ride along, that the dogs who are found in a dogfighting home or ring or whatever you call it, facility, that they can't be adopted? Do they have to be euthanized? Tell me, I forgot what you told me, but...
Well, I can give you better news than that we changed that law this year with our legislative team and our lobbyists to now allow for the placement of animals that have been impounded in dogfighting issues and the individual evaluation. Now, I think it's important to note and critical that doesn't mean every dog we pick up in a dogfighting case is going to find a home. Sometimes there's issues of the dog is maybe too far gone or dangerous and shouldn't be placed, and that when the humane euthanasia with compassionate treatment while they have it is the appropriate outcome. But now there is that outcome. But prior to January of this year, pedigree dogs impounded in dogfighting cases and their first generation offspring were required to be euthanized. And now we're able to look at them as individuals and look at them as animals that could potentially find a home. And in this 35 dog case, we were able to place several of them.
That's amazing. I remember how Matt was very upset that I mean, I didn't understand this, but an offspring of a fighting dog that was found on the house at the house when they busted a dogfighting ring had to be euthanized. It was a law. Wasn't involved in the fighting, and that really made Matt upset. He put his legislative team to work, and they changed the law. So that's impressive. I mean, these are innocent little dogs. They could have been puppies at the time. I remember you telling me this story that really upset you.
Well, I consider all the victims of cruelty that we face all innocent victims.
I mean, that's a great use of your time.
But it's good to know for people who think about where they're giving charitable money to, the kinds of things you guys are doing. It's really so all across the board. I mean, something like that can make as much or more of a difference as a doghouse for a single dog in a backyard or whatever. It's just it's really important, I think, to keep trying to do what you're doing and getting out and educating people so that they realize, how broad and how big a difference you guys make in this community.
Yeah, I'm kind of biased. I'm the CEO, but I look at the work that we do every day, and I would challenge anyone to find a more impactful organization that makes every dollar that we get do more good than this organization. And it is. Our costs are increasing as the cases come to us more complex, as we start to handle the hardest of the hardest to handle, and whether behaviorally, medically, the things that we do to reach into the community. If you want to change a life, think about how important your pet is to you, and now think about the experience that we both we maintain and we give to tens of thousands of people every year. And through the complexity of our services, it's not all just at our shelters. Our programs reach into the community, animals that will never walk into our shelters. So we impact the lives of almost 100,000 individual animals every year, and about 75,000 families every year.
If there's people out there listening or watching and they want to help the Michigan Humane Society, which is one of my favorite organizations and charities to give to every year, what's the best way to do it? And talk about the competition for money at this time of the year, as we're coming up on our holidays here.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is, if you want to make a difference and you want to be a part of what we do, be a voice for animals. It's number one is embody our mission, be a voice. If you see something, say something. If you can do something, do it. And there's a lot of ways you can help. Obviously, with the costs of doing business, we would love you to consider donating to the organization, and we will put that to good use, saving lives. You can go to michiganhumane.org and look at many different ways that you can donate. You can volunteer. You can adopt. There's so many ways you can help. And you talk about the competition. So first of all, there are so many organizations doing incredible work in the city of Detroit, and we're clearly not the only one. So I don't want to take away from any of the work that anyone else is doing, but selfishly, we impact human lives, we impact animal lives, and if you want this community to be the embodiment of humanity and compassion and that we believe it can be in the future, then we're the organization that can make that happen. And we would love to have the opportunity to talk to people more about what we do. And I would ask people to experience it for themselves. Mm-hmm. And then I would ask them to think about their animals, think about their pets and what it means to them. And understand that we're an organization that can help them give that experience to others.
I'd encourage people to get involved too and learn more about the mission. And when you talk about keeping the families together, that's what I learned getting to know your organization better. It's not looking to take away the animals. It's looking to educate and keep the families together at all costs. That's the first mission. That's the first priority. That's what made me fall more in love with the organization. And do you sell any type of calendars or anything like that?
So we talk about the value that our animals have to us personally, and I don't know if you have that experience, but I thought I would just share a couple images and see if they evoke any emotions in us of our pets.
Look at this gorgeous dog. So this is Jessie, my dog. I have not seen this until right this second. So that's an adorable picture. So I'm going to tell Kevin the story because Matt obviously knows it. They have a fabulous fundraiser every year called the Bow Wow Brunch. And Ross, for the last 5 or 6 years, has taken me to the Bow Wow Brunch. I think it's been 6 years, and it's this wonderful event at different venues where they get lots and lots of people to come. They put on a nice brunch. They have a great silent auction that I always buy things I don't need. They have gorgeous animals that are being cared for by, handlers who walk around with dogs and cats. I haven't seen any cows there, but maybe next year. And I took 2 of my 3 daughters there 5 years ago with Ross and his lovely wife and some other people. And as I'm going through the line to bid on all these things that I don't need in the silent auction, my daughters, who were young at this time, one was 15 and one was 10, came running up to me, Daddy, we found a dog that we want. I'm like, leave me alone. We don't want a dog. My first dog, Shadow, who was adopted from the Michigan Humane Society, had died a couple of years before that, a year before that, and I still hadn't gotten over him. So if you remember your kids at 10 and 15, they can be relentless and annoying, and they grabbed me and they dragged me over to meet Jessie, and I fell in love immediately, as they did. And she was 8 weeks old, and it's an emotional story. I feel emotional telling the story. And I fell in love with her. She's still obviously with us. She's 5. She just turned 5. She is the love of our life. Thank you for having her there.
What would you say, Mike, to people who feel the way you do? Because it's something I hear all the time. Oh, when my dog passes, I don't think we're going to get another dog. I think we're done. And a lot of that is because of the emotional ties, and you go through that loss. It's terrible.
It's horrible.
So now being invested again, how is your experience?
It's worth it. It's worth it. The pain is worth it. I mean, you have to go through it. I knew I would get another dog. I wasn't ready. We didn't have a cage. We didn't have food. I didn't have a leash. So literally, we had the dog in the car. I had a checkbook, and we had to stop at a pet store on the way home. And it was the greatest decision we ever made. And I'm thankful I was there that day. I'm thankful my daughters were there, because had they not been there, and I've gone every year since, and I've not taken my daughters back because I don't want 2 or 3 or 4 dogs like Matt. But, my first dog was a Humane Society dog. This dog's a Humane Society dog. I'm very, very biased, and I get a little bit upset when close friends and family, not family, but friends go out and spend thousands of dollars on a purebred little cocker-doodle poodle, and, because of allergies or whatever. I mean, these dogs need us. These dogs need a home. The dogs who are being sold don't need, they're going to find their home. And there's just something, I don't want to use too strong of adjectives, but that upsets me when people don't at least go to the shelters and save a dog, and choose the other route. And I have a strong bias against it. I assume you have a similar.
Yeah, there's that. So first of all, there's a great quote. One of my favorite quotes is that everyone in the world thinks they have the best dog and no one's wrong. And that's so. You said something about when you lose a dog. I'll just tell you my quick story. So I had Bruce. So I grew up in New Jersey, and my dad grew up listening to Bruce Springsteen every chance I got. So I grew up, and I'm thinking, I'm naming my first kid. His name is going to be Bruce. We had my first boy, and my wife said, yeah, your first kid's not Bruce. So I have my oldest son is Corwin, but we ended up adopting a little party-colored Cocker Spaniel that I had picked off as an animal control officer, and that dog for 16 years never left my side. I moved across the country 4 times, lived alone while we were moving, and he was literally I still think about him frequently, call my dogs Bruce periodically, but he was never within 5 feet of me, was always on my lap, was always there for me. And he started to have cognitive disorders, which is a little bit more difficult than when you see dogs aging into the later stages of life. Is his head wasn't working, so he stopped recognizing the kids and started behaving inappropriately. Start banging his head against walls, and I knew it was time. He was alive now for me, not for him, and so we had to make that difficult decision. And I'm around thousands of animals every day, and I just didn't think I would ever. Every time someone would say, Matt, we'd love to do a story internally about you fostering or adopting, and I would come up with some excuse. I couldn't do it. I had something going on. I couldn't do it. I was traveling or whatever. I couldn't do it. This is not the right one. And then when I saw Rocky, my current dog, it was the first time I looked at a dog and didn't think about Bruce, and that's when I knew, oh, it's over, and it was going to happen.
Come on home, Bruce.
And and that's how I felt. That's how I felt about it. I felt like, it's a great closure to get that same feeling, and they're all so independent and different, and give you such an experience. And I feel like pets shape our lives as much as we shape theirs, and I'm honored to have given a second chance to Rocky, and he deserves all the love that he gets from our family.
They make a difference, don't they? Each dog.
Too, they say. I was reading about the study. Yeah.
So I'm learning how to do this podcast. I'm learning how to do interviews, and I'm learning how to finish stories, because sometimes we get off on tangents. But the story behind the calendar, which I didn't tell, I mean, I want to bring closure. You can buy this thing. So at the live auction, they auction off the cover, which goes for $15,000, $20,000, $25,000.
It's gone for as high as I think in the 30s.
$30,000. The inside pages are less, but we bought April last year, 2019. We bought it in 20, and there's not only is my beautiful dog in it, but there are other beautiful animals in it. How can people get a copy of this calendar if they wanted?
Well, first of all, Jesse is going to look great on the cover next year. I am sure.
I may have to get a second job. I'll see how this podcast goes.
There is some fierce competition in that room. You want to talk about bidding war? That's it. You can go to our website, MichiganHumane.org. You can find some merchandise over there. Our calendars are available online, as well as find out more about our services. But the calendars you can find out there. And these are all opportunities to have your pet be showcased. Everyone wants to have their pet be showcased. And I'm so thankful for you for stepping up and being a part of the calendar.
It's my pleasure. It's my daughter's favorite thing, and I'm going to take at least one of these home. We could probably give Kevin one to take home too. I think they're sending me mine. This year. And as far as the adoption that was mentioned, just if people are listening, they want to adopt an animal. I know that we sponsor something on TV with Channel 4, Adopt a Pet. We pay for the adoption services, but the animals are getting adopted.
Oh,
correct?
Yeah,
and so I don't want to you always have animals there, but we're lucky enough in this community that they're not sitting there for years upon years. I mean, tell me, how do you describe how quickly animals are getting adopted?
Well, it all depends on what the issue is when they came in. So again, with the escalating occurrences we see of dogs that have more severe behavioral issues that need to be worked on, or more severe medical issues, those dogs can spend a longer time. Once they're up for adoption, they tend to go pretty quick. I mean, our organization can only do what this community will support. And shut that off. Hit my alarm.
That means you got to go.
All right.
Got to go save a life.
Oh, that's not
He's got to go save a life.
We're causing trouble by keeping them away so long.
That's an alarm from my son, who I just got his first car, and he needed to go register later on. So he's
all right.
No, we're plenty good. We got
holiday tomorrow. You better get in there before 5.
The idea being, once they're up for adoption, there's no shortage of outlets and opportunities. And again, we can only do what this community will support, and we are blessed to be in a community that has such an incredible spirit. And while there's always opportunities for Metro Detroit and Detroit to get better, pets are important to us. In those instances, we do see a lot of people who look at other options for obtaining an animal, but many of them look shelter first. It's a very socially conscious community that we're really proud to be a part of. So they go pretty quick once they're in our care. You can check them out online. You can come in person. You can browse, make it your own personal petting zoo, and just check out what we have to offer. I guarantee if you do that, you'll end up leaving with one.
The facility's gorgeous, Kevin. If you've not been down on this, it's great. So you're right. They can walk around. They can meet the animals.
One question I did have for you. You mentioned that you can volunteer your time, which a lot of people have time. Do you need experience with animals to come and volunteer?
Oh, absolutely not. We will give you that experience. There's plenty of opportunities. So our leadership team has done an incredible job of engaging the community towards helping on our mission. People want to give back to this type of work. So 2 years ago, we had about 1,200 active volunteers. This year, we have 3,600. Wow. And we'll log in more than 100,000 hours of volunteer time. A lot of that is working behaviorally with animals, walking dogs, socializing cats. bottle feeding baby kittens. Is there a better opportunity than bottle feeding baby kittens? So fostering animals, that's a critical part of what we do. And I'm glad you brought up adoptions, because the other option is to foster animals, which is a temporary, bringing animals into your home temporarily. And then once they're ready, you bring them back. Typically, they end up staying with the home who's fostering them. But as more animals need these significant medical rehabilitation experiences with us, that requires us to find homes for them to recover. And their foster homes are a very critical part of what we need to do. So foster homes is another great opportunity.
Good to know. So hopefully people will check you out online. Is there anything else we haven't asked you that you want to talk about so our listeners know, or do you think we're good?
Just again to thank you publicly for the support you've given us. The voice here, a lot of times, I heard you say earlier that I didn't know you did that. We hear that a lot. And we're a very complex organization that we encourage people in this community to learn more about. We talk about being human-centered. We didn't start to save dogs and cats. We started in 1877 to save horses, work horses coming out of the Civil War, and women and children the subject of domestic violence. And we are the most impactful animal welfare organization in the state of Michigan right now, but we do so much more to support families, to support law enforcement, to support children, to boost the economy, to impact the quality of life for everyone who lives in this community. And I would encourage you to learn more about our organization, because we've been an institution here for 142 years, and we want you to know about us.
Well, thank you for coming on our podcast. And, I get to meet a lot of CEOs in my life. And I don't know if I know a CEO and president more passionate about their job than you, who cares more about the organization, who cares about life, who cares about the mission that you guys are trying to carry out and do carry out expertly. I've watched you on the job. I've been at the shelters. I've spent a lot of good time with you. We even golfed one round together, and it was an off day, but it's been so fun to get to know you, and I'm just really impressed. And I really, encourage people to get to know you and get to know this organization, and give and support and foster and volunteer, buy calendars, and just be part of it, because it really is a special organization. So I just want to say thank you for all you do.
That means a lot to me. And again, our work is only a product of an incredible team, an incredible board of directors, and incredible supporters.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Matt. And thanks for watching and listening to another episode of Open Mic. See you next time.
Joining us this morning is Mike Morse, Croyd's Top Dirty. Mike Morse is in here to tell us about the backpack giveaway.
Adapt and change things up a little bit every year. Thanks for watching Open Mic. I hope you've been enjoying the episodes. Please subscribe over here. Watch all the episodes, like the episodes, share the episodes, and subscribe. Subscribing helps me, and it helps get the word out. So do it. Enjoy the episodes, share with your friends and family, and keep enjoying.